Hello internets. So one type of evidence that is generally considered to be bottom tier value at best and completely false at worst is anecdotal evidence. This is evidence that is based entirely on the experiences of an individual and usually cannot be verified or replicated in any way. This of course makes this type of evidence horribly unreliable, as an unusual experience by one person obviously is not enough to disprove the data behind what is commonly understood. For instance, if Reimu comes along and states that 1 + 1 = 2, and Cerno comes along and swears that she has had several experiences where 1 + 1 somehow added up to 9, this is obviously not good enough evidence to prove that 1 + 1 = 9. Or how about if she claims that she totally saw a UFO and the UFO totally abducted her and then totally tied her down and tickled her with magic feathers, and the next thing she knew she had woken up in a mushroom patch. This is not very good evidence that UFOs and aliens are real. And why is this? Well, because individual experiences that form anecdotal evidence have several issues. First is the fact that, of course, people claiming X has happened to them, despite more honest statistical data analysis showing Y is more likely to occur, doesn't necessarily prove the statistics are wrong. There's also the problem with anecdotes that a person could be lying or they themselves can have been misled to be biased in some manner. And of course, they could be mistaken, delirious, or otherwise delusional, because sometimes people can just be downright stupid. That's just how it is. Which, if a person is demanding that their anecdotal evidence be taken seriously and are unable to understand why it's not a valid argument, chances are pretty good that they aren't exactly the sharpest tool in the shed. So just thinking about it logically, if we accepted anecdotal evidence as valid, we would find ourselves being forced to reach some pretty ridiculous conclusions now, wouldn't we? And that's why this type of evidence is almost always rejected. However, there is one special scenario where using anecdotal evidence is totally okay, and can even be accepted in academic papers. And that, of course, is when it's within the subject matter of victimhood. Just say the incantation, Muh Lived Experience, in this context, and then all of the issues with anecdotal evidence magically no longer apply to you. Do you feel oppressed? Well, then you are oppressed. Not to worry, just say Muh Lived Experience, and that oppressed victim status is all yours. Do you feel like you haven't been included because of whatever contemporary group you believe yourself to belong to? Did you bounce around Reimu's shrine again, only for her to eventually get tired of it and forcibly remove you into the ocean? Not to worry, just say Muh Lived Experience, and the reason for your new oceanic dwelling space magically no longer has anything to do with your crazy behavior earlier, but is clearly the result of systemic discrimination against ice fairies. Walk into an establishment and see not enough other fairies inside? Well then clearly this must be a result of systemic discrimination against ice fairies. Never mind the fact that there is zero evidence of this, you saw something different, and your personal lived experience is all that matters. Someone looked at you funny. Clearly, this was also a lived experience of discrimination against ice fairies. Tripped on a rock on the way home? Clearly, more evidence of discrimination against ice fairies. Misplaced your car keys? Burnt your toast? Got lost in the woods? Gnomes stole your underwear? All of these are clearly a lived experience of ice fairies being excluded from diversity, equity, and inclusion. The phrase lived experience is indeed a magic spell that combines with the power of DEI, and presto, rabbit out of a hat, your anecdotal evidence is now fully acceptable as factual data that could even be used in academic papers. Okay, obviously I'm lacing this one with a lot of sarcasm, but the reasoning behind Muh Lived Experience is so obviously disconnected from reality that it's kind of difficult to show what's wrong with it without also making fun of it. But seriously now, what exactly is going on here and why is this terrible concept so prevalent? Muh Lived Experience is obviously just a fancy way to frame anecdotal evidence, and so all of the problems I went over in the first minute of this video still apply to it, and therefore lived experiences obviously aren't anything to be taken seriously. Well, one explanation is that woke cults in academia have a very big problem. More in-depth and honest analysis of economic and FBI statistics often reveal that the various victimhood narratives that the cult of woke preaches are in fact completely imaginary. For instance, we know that things like the wage gap or racial differences in outcomes and police behavior all have perfectly reasonable alternative explanations than discrimination. And so they have adopted Muh Lived Experience as a kind of double standard to claim that anecdotal evidence is okay as long as it's in defense of intersectional victimhood. And this unfortunately creates a very big problem, because when anecdotal evidence is combined with persecutory delusions, it results in a very circular way of looking at the world. When people are led to believe that so-called microaggressions are happening to them because of their group identity, those people can easily end up thinking that every bad thing under the sun that happens to them is evidence of their persecution. So they know they're a victim of persecution because bad stuff, and they know that that bad stuff was targeting them based on their group identity because they're a victim of persecution, and round and round their thinking goes. The truth is that most of the time people don't really have any way of knowing for sure if any mistreatment they receive is actually a result of discrimination or something else. For instance, if you apply for a job and you don't get it, the place you applied for probably isn't going to tell you why you didn't get chosen. Well, you can choose to believe they discriminated against you and drown in your sorrow, or you can choose to go through your resume to consider what can be improved for the next time. And here's what exposes just how toxic this thinking is. Since you don't know why you were rejected either way, Assuming that you have something that can be improved upon is actually far more beneficial to you. The person who chooses to remain a victim is making the mistake of focusing on the problems in their life they can't change, while the person who chooses to reflect and improve has a much greater chance of exceeding on the next try because they're focusing on things they can change. Which means that in their attempt to create a double standard with lived experiences, where this type of flawed evidence is treated as acceptable, the woke scolds are actually encouraging a mindset that harms the very people they are trying to defend. That's pretty much all Muh Lived Experience is. It's just a cult of woke pretending that anecdotal evidence is valid so long as the circumstance helps them push their ideology. It's very, very dumb, it's very circular, and it's actually detrimental to the minority groups it claims to be helping. So if anyone tries to tell you that you can't disprove their lived experience, well actually yes you can, because the fact that they are trying to use anecdotal evidence to prove an ideology means they probably aren't very bright, and thus their anecdote can be safely ignored. So thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to like, subscribe, and all that. Till next time.